Attractive Spinsters, written by Ben-Tzion Spitz, narrated by Jennifer Kahen. "They laughed at them," Shmita said to the little girl. "They always laughed at them," Shmita repeated as he leaned back on his low stool. The little girl looked up at Shmita with adoring eyes. Shmita's face and arms were wrinkled like a prune left in the sun. His robe was freshly ripped over his heart. He smiled widely, revealing one remaining tooth protruding from his lower gums. "People always laughed at Tirzah and her sisters, but it was a mean laugh. They ridiculed them. They teased them. They wanted the girls to hear laughter and feel pain." "But why?" the little girl asked. She was 7 years old, had dark, long braided hair and freckles that spread from her face down her arms. She sat cross-legged on the wooden porch floor, looking at Shmita. He was looking at the wide expanse of land from the porch of his large stone house. A fresh grave lay under an oak tree. "Why were they so mean?" "Tirzah and her sisters were unusual. Their father was killed for a well-publicized sin he committed in the desert. Zlafchad publicly violated the Sabbath. Moses, our teacher, had him stoned to death in front of all of Israel. It was something the tribes would not let the girls forget. No one would marry them. They got older and grayer and walked around the camp as a pack of 5 tall, middle-aged spinsters." "How did you marry her then?" "Even though they were older, all the sisters were beautiful, especially Tirzah. She was the youngest of them. She was 41. Towards the ends of our stay in the desert on the plains of Moab, Moses spoke about dividing the land and who would inherit. Tirzah and her sisters approached the leaders of our tribe, the leaders of Manasseh, and requested the inheritance of Zlafchad. I remember the meeting vividly, for I also sat on that council. Our council leader, Yochanan, yelled at them for daring to bother the council with such a frivolous request. "Who ever heard of a woman inheriting?" he had screamed, his face reddening behind his short white beard. "In what world does a woman have property rights?" Then Yochanan laughed, a deep, long, and sensitive laugh. Other council members joined in the laughter. "Foolish girls! The inheritance of Zlafchad shall go to his brothers and their descendants. Do not bother us any more with this issue." "How convenient, Uncle Mala," the oldest said, "that you should directly benefit from your own ruling. We shall seek redress elsewhere." "How dare you!" Yochanan pounded on the table in front of him. "How dare you imply a miscarriage of justice? Our ways are clear. It is you daughters of a notorious sinner, that are mistaken, gravely mistaken. I forbid you to take this matter further. If you continue to spout such venom, it is the court, this holy court, that will punish your wrongdoing and your libel." The 5 girls looked to the ground, redness creeping up their necks to fill their face. They shuffled away from the council without further word. He looked at the face of the oldest, of Mala. He glanced at her eyes, expecting sadness or frustration. It was surprising for Shmita to see determination. All 5 of the girls walked away with quiet determination on their faces. Yochanan did not notice. "But Shmita, you didn't explain how you married her." "That's when Tirzah first caught my eye. The next day was when I decided to marry her." "So, what happened?" The little girl jumped up, still cross-legged on the porch. "Tell me what happened already." The next day was a day of the full council of sages, led by Moses himself, in front of the tabernacle courtyard. 70 sages sat in a semicircle on either side of Moses and his nephew Eleazar, the new high priest. Dozens of people lined up to have their cases heard. Hundreds stood around to hear the deliberations. Shmita was amongst them, standing next to Yochanan. "What is the next case?" Moses asked Eleazar, sitting to his right. "Elsa, the divorcee of Lamech from Dan, claims that she should be entitled to an inheritance from her father," Eleazar answered. A heavy woman in her 50s approached Moses slowly. "Greetings, Elsa. Moses said, and then turned towards the sages. Though the case is straightforward, it is still a fresh law. Would one of our esteemed colleagues do us the favor of explaining the relevant laws? An elderly sage from the tribe of Gad stood up and explained the law to the assembly. Other sages asked questions and debated points of law. The verdict was finally given. Elsa would not inherit any land in Canaan, though her brothers were commanded to support her from their father's estate. Then, 5 tall, regal-looking women slowly jostled through the crowd around the tabernacle. I told them not to bother Moses, Yochanan pointed at the sisters approaching the courtyard. It seems you were not convincing, Shemitah said. Those girls of Zlafchad will just cause trouble, Yochanan said. They have a right to bring forward their complaint. They brought it to me already, and I ruled against them. That should have been the end of it. You are not exactly unbiased in this matter, Yochanan. I think perhaps you should have let someone else rule on the inheritance question. There is no question. Since when does a woman inherit? I've never heard of such a thing. I give them credit for trying. Those spinsters have too much time on their hands. They need husbands to keep them out of trouble. No father and no husband is a poor combination. I need to stop them. Yochanan got closer to the assembled sages and spoke to a few at the edge of the semicircle. Do women now come and blatantly dictate the agenda of the court? What do you mean, Yochanan? One of the sages asked. Look at the gaggle of women approaching. I heard their case and it was nonsense. Their coming to the high court is disrespectful to our system of justice. It is disrespectful to you. Yochanan pointed at the sage. Who are they? What do they want? The sage asked. A crowd formed around Yochanan to hear the discussion. Yochanan hid a smile. They are the daughters of Zlafchad. Remember him? They want to inherit land in Canaan from their dead father. He had no sons, and they argue that girls should receive land. Who ever heard such drivel? The 5 sisters stood in front of the semicircle of sages. Murmuring from the crowd grew louder upon the realization of the 5 women standing in front of the court. Moses addressed them directly. With a kind but strong voice, he called their names. Mala, Noah, Chogla, Milcah, Tirzah. How can this assembly serve you? Mala approached Moses and pleaded. Our father died in the wilderness. He did not rebel against God with Korach's group. He died for his own sin, but he had no sons. Moses listened impassively. Mala and her sisters came closer to Moses. Mala got on her knees. Why should the name of our father disappear from among his family? Because he had no son? Give us, his daughters, an inheritance among the brethren of our father. The insolence! Yochanan called from the far side of the sages. Murmurs and arguing erupted around amongst the sages. Women! Landowners! Someone called out. The murmuring got louder. Tirzah and her sisters shifted restlessly in front of the sages. Silence! Moses bellowed. The assembly quieted down. Moses stared into the eyes of each of the sisters. They held hands awaiting his verdict. The case of the women has merit, Moses announced. I shall confer with God. Moses closed his eyes and tilted his head heavenward. He spread out his arms. The usual glow that surrounded Moses intensified. His eyes tightened in concentration. The sisters held their breath. Moses smiled and opened his eyes. He quoted God as saying that the daughters of Zlafchad are correct. The girls shivered at the words God, Zlafchad, and correct, and smiled. He said they shall inherit their father's portion. Moses explained in more detail the laws of inheritance. Sons inherit the father, but if there is no son, the land goes to his daughters. If there are no children, it goes to the brothers of the deceased. The 5 sisters bowed towards Moses and left the assembly. The crowd parted to let the sisters through. Shemitah approached Tirzah. Has Yochanan's lackey come to spoil our victory? She demanded as she saw him. I am the lackey of no man, cousin Tirzah. I wish to congratulate you on your hard-fought battle and on your success, he said. Mala did most of the work, Tirzah said. It is you that I find interesting, Tirzah. It took great bravery for all of you to stand there together against the jeers of the assembly and in front of the gaze of Moses. Flattery is not something that I am accustomed to. Are you saying this because I've come into an inheritance? Tirzah, I have admired you for a full day before I discovered you will have a wealthy inheritance in Canaan. You are courageous and dignified, and I would have you as a wife. Will you marry me? That's very forward of you, Cousin Shmita. I prefer to let my older sisters marry first. Are you willing to wait? You have waited so long to marry. You wish to delay further? I wish to give my older sisters the honor of marrying in order. I shall wait. For a woman such as you, I will wait as long as you will have me. But now that your family has recovered from shame, and you are all inheritors, I don't expect we'll have to wait long. And they didn't. But why don't girls inherit with boys? The little girl asked. Girls are supported by the estate, but are not given land if there are male inheritors. That's not fair. I don't understand all the reasons myself, but I think God wanted to keep the land within the tribe. There was an added condition given to the daughters of Zlafchad. They could only marry within the tribe of Menashe. Is that why Grandma married you? It didn't hurt that we were from the same tribe, but I think she also liked me. Grandpa, you think she liked you? That's all you can say after 50 years? I guess there was a certain attraction between us. She loved you. I know. Fresh tears fell down Shmita's wrinkled face. I miss her. Me too. And the little girl hugged her grandfather. This has been Attractive Spinsters, written by Ben-Tzion Spitz, narrated by Jennifer Kahen.